on key challenges faced by African countries. The aim of the webinar series is to create knowledge and experience sharing forum, which will help to support national and global initiatives to address the current water resource challenge with technological institutional solutions, and to indicate future pathways and scenarios in line with the implementation of water-related sustainable development goals, with an aim of leaving no one behind. Our first webinar today, entitled "Is Water Hyacinth the Effect or the Cause for the Degradation of Ethiopian Wetlands?" For that matter, not only Ethiopian, many African wetlands. The egg or the chicken syndrome, question mark, by Professor Brook Lemma, who is a renowned limnologist at Addis Ababa University. The session will be moderated by Professor Zarihuun Woldu, who is a professor of plant ecology and biodiversity at Addis Ababa University. Now, Professor Zarihuun, the floor is yours. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zarihuun Woldu. I am a plant ecologist at the Department of Plant Biology and Biodiversity Management. I would also like to welcome you to this seminar organized by the African Center of Excellence for Water Management. This is the webinar series number 1. I would like to give a brief introduction about Professor Brook Lemma. Professor Brook Lemma obtained his bachelor's degree in biology in 1979 and his master's degree in 1984 in medical parasitology. He then headed to Dresden Technical University, Germany, to study freshwater ecology to obtain his PhD in 1997. His university services began at Haramaya University in 1985 as a lecturer, and he quickly climbed up the ladder to become an associate professor in the same university in 1998. He joined Addis Ababa University in 2005 to become associate professor at the Department of Biology Education, College of Education, Addis Ababa University. He is professor of freshwater ecology at the Aquatic Science stream of the Department of Zoological Sciences, College of Natural Science, Addis Ababa University since 2009. Professor Brook Lemma has a very rich and diverse university service. He was assistant registrar of the continuing education program from 1987 to 1989, coordinator of the continuing education program from 1989 to 1991, and acting academic officer in the academic vice president's office from 1991 to 1992, and university registrar from 1998 to 2000, and then the dean of faculty of education from 2000 to 2004 at Haramaya University. His administrative services at Addis Ababa University include as a member of the editorial board of Journal of Education or Development College of Education, Addis Ababa University, head of the Department of Biology Education, College of Education at Addis Ababa University, Director of Research Program at Addis Ababa University, Chief Academic Officer for Research at Addis Ababa University, Interim Dean of the College of Natural and Computational Sciences, Grant Coordinator of Addis Ababa University as the Grant Coordinating Office of the University, accountable to the Office of the President of Addis Ababa University, Acting Director of the External Relations, Partnership and Communication Director of Addis Ababa University, Coordinator of the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, Project Coordinator and Contact Person to the Embassy of Sweden regarding Sweden support project, the position now he is holding. Professor Brook Lemma has published over 70 research articles in peer-reviewed journals and proceedings, and co-authored more than 5 books and teaching materials and modules. Professor Brook Lemma has taught several courses ranging from pedagogical methods to core science disciplines, including animal physiology, computer applications in teaching biology, and a series of lectures to masters and PhD students on wetland resources, livelihood, and wetland sustainable management. He has supervised several masters and PhD students. Professor Brook Lemma has delivered innumerable professional consultancy services to international agencies, government organizations, and non-government organizations. His research interests span through wetland management, land and water use planning, integrated land and water use management, water quality and sediment characteristics, small-scale fishery to household food security. Professor Brook Lemma is a very cheerful and cooperative person, a personality that has contributed to working at various capabilities and capacities in the university administration, both at Haramaya and Addis Ababa University. He has handled his administrative positions in teaching and professional activities effectively and efficiently. Professor Brook Lemma will talk on is hyacinths, water hyacinths, the effect or the cause of the degradation of Ethiopian wetlands, the egg or the chicken, a wetland ecologist, which he has been cherishing since now. To just comment on the subject of this webinar, water hyacinths, Eichhornia crassipes, is a member of the plant family Contedaceae. Eichhornia crassipes is an aquatic plant native to the Amazon basin and is often a highly problematic invasive species outside its native range. It is naturalized in Ethiopia long ago. It forms thick mat cover on the wetlands and large and small rivers in Gambela, where it is known as Tui Tui. It had arrived in Koka Dam over 40 years ago. The plant was first sighted on the northern shore of Lake Tana when the biodiversity of lake was being assessed as part of the environmental impact assessment for the construction of the Tana Beles hydropower energy generation plant. Now, it has occupied a significant part of the lake and is becoming a menace. Now, I will take you back to Professor Brook Lemma to tell us all his stories on water hyacinths and whether it is the egg or the chicken syndrome. Professor Brook Lemma, back to you. The rest of the time is yours.
Firstly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the very generous introduction. So firstly, I would like to extend my appreciation for the Water Management African Center of Excellence for Water Management project sponsored by the World Bank and Addis Ababa University for inviting me. Secondly, I also appreciate all those who are participating now here at home and internationally to take off time from your busy schedules to listen to whatever small things I have to talk about. With that, I should also admit that although I want to, I've been invited to make this presentation, I don't personally say that I am the best or the most available, I mean the best intellectual in the country with this, in this area of invasive species control. There are many others in this country who are extensively working on this, but I just want to contribute my small experiences I had and the things that I have observed traveling over different parts of the world, and I mean different parts of the Ethiopian waters, and the experiences I gathered over time. With that, I want to start my presentation. Firstly, I have a small prologue, introduction kind of presentation, whereby I want to present some pristine environments where local people are using, the bare minimum of the water quality to their kind of way of life that they lead. This is the minimum that they require really to live by consuming the water directly from streams for home use, bathing, and so on. And it is this quality that we have continuously lost through the process. And this is what we couldn't get back to the original. Although they deserve as much quality water, as much pure water as we all use here in towns and developed places. Others like this are also dependent on whatever is percolates from tarmac roads and take home. So it is that quality of water that is very dire in this country. So the title in this, that I wanted to make it as attractive as possible so that people could get attracted to come to attend this. And I opted to this kind of title because I see many presentations or read many papers or comments on national media, more or less lacking some clarity. Probably, so my effort is maybe to add some more clarity, although I may not be doing the optimum or the maximum kind of clarity that may be required. But I want to make my modest presentation with this. So through this presentation, I have been roaming around in this country. In the first place, as a young fellow where I worked is where the red circle is showing is the eastern part of Ethiopia, where Lake Alamaya at the time, now Lake Haramaya, has been there some 30 years ago since I was working on that lake. And then I traveled into the Rift Valley, and I've seen a number of water bodies, rivers and streams and lakes, particularly Rift Valley lakes, where I have experienced some of the things that I am going to present here. And then this is the Rift Valley. And then I traveled further north, and then I give you some reflections about Lake Tana, which is the current high topic with regard to the invasive species water hyacinths in this lake and the requirements of the community and the government from the water system, which have eventually become incompatible. So lots of efforts are being done to make some control to this. So I go back then to the original place where I was. The worst scenario that I've ever experienced with wetlands is the case of Lake Haramaya, where it was by something like 1985. It was such a beautiful lake with blue water, very clean water, but of course at the time very shallow, about 9 meters, maximum depths, but still very, very highly important to a very highly populated watershed. This watershed was providing many, many services to the people. I will just give you a few of them. Fisheries, and particularly weekends, the shores are filled with people recreating, bathing, washing clothes, and so on, which is common in rural parts of Ethiopia. And then there are people from town also who need water for construction and other purposes that take water by trucks. And there are also the farmers around the shore who farm the water right up to the shore. You can see the maize plant right on the shore. And it was extensively, the water has been extensively abstracted for irrigation purposes. That was a very beautiful lake. And by 1985-86, an aerial photograph was also taken by the South African environment. This Bow Lake is the one which was then called Alamaya, now Haramaya Lake, where I had to work for over 20 years. Now, over the years now, what I have observed at Lake Haramaya is that the total water budget was about 6.7 million cubic meters of water. And the total water loss of the lake was about 6.8, 6.9 cubic meters of water. And annually it was operating at a deficit of 130,000 cubic meters of water. The details you can see for what purposes the water has been used. And what its source was, mainly runoff and rainfall. And eventually, nobody operates by deficit, and eventually the lake died out. Now, then when I looked into the land use pattern of the area, the brown areas are cultivated areas, agricultural areas, and the green ones, let me check. Yes, the brown ones, agriculture areas. And these agriculture areas were eventually being covered by one other particular plant that was taking over even the agricultural cultivated areas. This happened to be chat or Catha edulis, stimulant plant. So eventually, this was by 1989, it took about 24% of the land cover. And then by 1999, it took about 29%. As you can see, this stimulant plant started to take over, pushing away maize and sorghum and other crops that the farmers were doing because it was commercially very important, very lucrative by the money it was producing to the farmers. Eventually, by 2010, practically all the ground was covered by that. The important thing why I mentioned this particular crop is that because it is a very, very water thirsty plant that required irrigation over through the year, and the farmers were pumping water out of the lake throughout the year, and then they were harvesting multiple harvests over the year and making a lot of money. And because of that, then over 37 years period, then the relationships that you can see is that the red dots represent the expansion of Catha edulis, and the yellow part shows you the decline of the water surface. Eventually, the lake disappeared. And so, the day that the inevitable happened was on the 28th December 2005, the lake completely disappeared, and that was the fate. But very recently, we hear that the last rainy season all over the country, in fact, in many places, including Kenya and other places, the rain was so high that some amount of water has now percolated into the area, and which I will travel and see next week. Now, by the time Lake Haramaya died, 2005, then I also left the area and came to Addis, as Professor Zarihun mentioned in the review. I joined at Saba University in 2005. So by the time it disappeared, it didn't show any eutrophication, and hence no water hyacinth grows because probably its smallness, speeded up drying before the predisposing factors for water hyacinths appeared in the area. That is my understanding. Then I went to Abaya with its beautiful peninsula, which is in the Rift Valley, almost the southern part of the Rift Valley. As you can see, the water color, it's brownish, and the water that enters into it also, the River Blate, one of the biggest feeder rivers, it is filled with silt and nutrients, and hence the water color also very silty, and very loaded with lots of nutrients. And eventually water hyacinths started to appear in this water system also. So these are the, when we zoom in, we saw this water hyacinths invading the lake also. We go to Lake Oka, which is again very close to Addis, about 230 or so kilometers from here. Lake Oka also receives its most water from River Awash, again, which is loaded with silts and then with nutrients, and particularly, the all watershed of the Addis Ababa city also flows, or the rivers from Addis also take over, or take all the wastes from Addis down to Awash and then to Lake Oka, which is also a source of nutrient supply, contaminations, pesticides, different kinds of heavy metals, and the same water is being used for irrigation by flower farms and many other different sorts of irrigation. These are some floating pumps of the area. There are times when Lake Oka is also highly inundated because of the heavy rains during the rainy seasons, and you can see the marks on the trees, which is a maximum level of the water that was coming into it. But the thing is, again, with the case with Nalamaya, and again that is also repeating here, is that the lake is farmed right up to the shore. As the water regresses, the farmers follow and plow it, and then grow their crops, and apply their fertilizers, pesticides, and whatever they are using in terms of agrochemicals. These are all washed into the water system that add to the eutrophication of the water system. Eventually, because it's inevitable, with so much load of nutrients, then water has started to cover Lake Oka as well. And it's very extensive in Lake Oka. And if I go back to the previous slide, in the dry seasons, as the water regresses, then farmers follow and overturn the water hyacinths and then start to grow their crops. They use it as part of their fertilizing system probably. And so the shores of Lake Oka are, very highly irrigated for vegetable crops. And there is a lucrative market in Addis, and which is not a very distant drive from Addis. So the market is very accessible from where Lake Oka and the farmers are found. And at other shores, similarly, in the same lake, it's not only water hyacinths that is a nuisance, but cyanobacteria are also growing in big plant in very high biomass, and the amount of poisons they produce have been recorded to have infected animals, children, and there are also reportedly cases and many reports on the national television and international media as well. Animals also go into the water hyacinths, cattle and so on, and they try to find some succulent leaves or grazable materials inside there, at the same time where they collect the infective kinds of agrochemicals, pathogenic bacteria and worms and so on, which eventually cascade in the food chain and come up to people. And there are cases of animals dying because of toxicity of cyanobacteria. Heavy metals have been reported repeatedly from Lake Oka. In Lake Zowai, which has been studied, and its watershed, which has been studied very extensively, what we found is that the land use and land cover pattern of Lake Zowai has been studied from 1973 to 2014, over 41 years study. And the major land use patterns that have been followed up were the settlement Afro-alpine forests. Anyway, the list down with the colors. And by 1973, the land use pattern appeared this way. Very important ones probably, if you look at the purple color, the wood, which is by 1973, which is very pronounced, and the cultivated area is the yellow part. And the Afro-alpine forests are at the edges of the eastern Chilalo Mountains and at the end of the western, the Gurage Mountains, and all other land use patterns in between. By 1989, the patterns started to get skewed, and the purple color started to appear, to disappear very slowly, and the cultivated area, the yellow part, has started to increase so much. And by 2014, the cultivated area was so much extensive, almost the purple color, or the woodland parts, whatever forest parts and grazing places and bushlands, were taken over. So in addition to this, there are settlements that were expanding, and the water surface was also shrinking, and so on. Now, so that is the purple is the woodland, yellow is the cultivation, and the green ones are for alpine as major demarcating or indicators of the changes in land use, land cover of the area. Now, when we looked also into the population growth pattern, these are the various dots in this curve that you see are the various waradas or districts of the administrative districts. In every district, the population, the human population increase was very high, and the total population extended over 19 million, and the space and function relationship was very much affected because of the high population. The fertilizer use in the area was always increasing, over the years, 2011 to 2015. And all these fertilizers, all of this comes from outside the Zawai watershed. Mostly these are imported fertilizers. So then I would think that these are extra new loads to the watershed that we are putting year after year into the environment, which the environment had to accommodate. Livestock population has also been increasing from 2011 to 2015 continuously. But again, the question is, there is not sufficient grazing place because it has been being taken over by cultivated area. It has been taken over by settlements and so on. Then the productivity of the animals is poor, but the head count is very high. Then what are we serving? Are we serving numbers or are we serving productivity is a big question. So the feeder rivers, if you look again, like the other water systems that were visited in this presentation, the major feeder river is the one that comes from the Chilalo Mountain, the eastern part from the east of the Lake Zawai, again, which is very much loaded with silt and nutrients because all along the river, there are lots of irrigation spaces. So major silt nutrient loads were coming in. Now, the phosphate external load from Maki River was measured. The Maki River is a river that comes from the western side, from the Gurage mountain side. Qatar River is coming from the eastern side. These are the two feeder rivers. Both of them come with loads of nutrients. The floriculture produce located on the shore of Lake Zawai also produces this. And then the external surface nutrients export by way of the Bulbula River. There is a river that is, leaving the lake and feeding other rivers, other water systems like Abijata downstream. So the balance that remains, the balance that stays in Lake Zawai is higher always. Then we studied the sediments. We cut out the sediment column and to see the nutrient level at different levels. This is the water column as it was standing in the water, and we cut it and then we measured the nutrient levels at each level. Each time the nutrient level at the surface is always very high, and that always has got, because this is a very shallow lake, there is overturn of the of the lake, complete overturn, top-down mixing of the water takes every day, so nutrients are always again injected from the sediment into the water system. Not only that comes from the rivers, but also internally. The internal nutrient load also very high in the lake. So eventually over the years, what we have observed is that if you look at the black upper line with the X mark, in it is the intensive cultivated area has been increased over time, while the dotted green ones, which is the woodland, has been disappearing over the years. And the water, the blue dashed lines were also decreasing, but to a very small extent. Maybe I will explain this later on. And the forests have also been decreasing. So cultivation is expanding, settlement is expanding at the expense of the forests, the water surface, and the woodland. So the percentage of land use, land cover, when we look at Lake Zowai, the settlement has increased by 136% in 41 years. The cultivated area has increased by 44%, and the woodland has decreased even below that, below 0.75%. It has completely, the woodland completely has disappeared. And then the water surface, look in the box, this is also, it shows a decrease, but again, that should not mislead you. This is only a measure of the water surface. But if you look at the depth of Lake Zowai today, it has become very, very shallow because of the silt that is coming from the two rivers. And, you know, with the run of every rainy season, during the long rainy seasons and the short rainy season. So it's only a sheet of water that's expanding on the surface, but the total volume of the water is very low. So when we went into the western escarpment of the Lake Zowai from the Gurage mountainside and took a picture of the lake, you can see the lake, how settlement is very much crowded. And you may think that the white patch at the front may be part of the lake, but which is not, which is actually a very extensive flower farm placed on the shore, right on the shore, that takes a large amount of water from the lake and releases its effluent, untreated effluent into the water system, which is the most contributor to nutrient and hormones, different kinds of agrochemicals into the water system directly. And then we went to the eastern escarpment, to the Chilalo mountainside, and then took the same picture. And then when we looked at it from that side, you can see how extensive this flower farm is. This picture was taken, I don't know, some 7 or 8 years ago. Now it has even increased in surface area. It has expanded in the direction of the Hawassa Drive. So, you can imagine then the load that the water system has to carry. So eventually, when we come to the water surface and again look into the area, then the water hyacinth, and behind it you can see the flower farm. I'm not blaming the flower farm only as the major contributor, but it is a factor. But it's but all the irrigation farms around Lake Zowai, all these extended cultivated areas use fertilizers and different kinds of agrochemicals. Is not so much controlled. The plant, crop, water, and soil relationship has not been studied and recommended. So farmers just collect fertilizers and apply. And so I'm not only blaming the flower farms. So water hyacinth coverage in some Ethiopian waters appears to be in these percentages. I haven't seen exactly the amount at Tana. Matahara, just as an example, there are other similar lakes like Matahara that do not have water hyacinth. There are reasons for that. This is 2014 data, but by now, in the list, as you can see, Zowai is not there. Today, then you have the right to include Zowai, which is also highly invested by water hyacinth. There are also other water systems, rivers and wetlands that are invested. I hope those of you who know Matahara, because it is very, very highly saline and alkaline lake, because of that, such kinds of plants cannot grow. The same thing is true with Shala and Chetu and so on. So this is just as an example that I included it. So when you go back to Lake Tana, then there is nothing much different that I can tell you, because the same kinds of, the same kind of government policies, the same kind of culture of agriculture, the same kind of, industrial expansion, the same kind of, settlement expansion, and so on, is extending even in the Lake Tana watershed. So Lake Tana cannot be also an exception to any other water systems that we have. So I don't have to prove anything to you to tell you. Then Lake Tana is also highly populated. These are the natives of the Lake Tana watershed, and I was fortunate to find these native people, collected in such an environment. Population is also increasing, like in Zawai and other watersheds in Haramaya as well. And the land is also highly degraded. Again, no control on land is public owned. And the wetlands are also so much exposed. And because of this, but again, still wetlands like Lake Tana are the key determinants of the livelihoods of people, even on the streets that you see, products of wetlands, maize, lemon, even fishes are, marketed, which is the livelihood of many of the hundreds and thousands and millions of Ethiopians live on it. This is a daily experience that if you travel into the again, Lake Tana area, this is an aerial picture of Lake Tana. You can see the propeller of the aircraft that I was in. So the land is so much degraded. The forests are gone. And the rivers that go into Lake Tana are also so much loaded with silt and nutrients. And the settlements around Lake Tana are also extending right all the way up to the shore. It goes on without any buffer system extending around it. You can see how it extends, and you can also look at the color of the water, which is no different from the rivers that are running at very high speed to come and settle into the Lake Tana system. The settlements again are also increasing, and even new roads are being extended. Now this picture was taken, I think, in 2018. Yes, I remember 2018. If I go now, I'm sure these open spaces are not there, taken over by settlements, constructions, or industries, or particularly hotels on the shores of this water system. Again, you can see the water quality of the water, how it is. And even the airport, the runoff, is directly leading to the lake. In the far distance, what you see is Lake Tana, where the water is percolating or directly flowing into the system. So eventually, then there is no surprise. There is no surprise why water hyacinth is there, because of all of these lakes, and it started to compete with the native vegetation. And so Lake Tana, its watershed experienced the same fate as the cases of the above lakes. So you can look over 40 years, you go backwards, then the population grows, land use patterns and built-in environments have increased, water abstraction has increased, agricultural inputs have increased, livestock population have increased, industrial and zero waste outputs have increased, and climate factors have changed, affected all as a common denominator and so on. These have been going on. So all of the above are increasing, bypassing the natural resilience of Lake Tana and its water systems. All of this is done in our efforts to develop very fast, because we have got a very high population in this country, one of the highest, or the second in Africa in population, and most of these people are very young people who need jobs, and government efforts always to push development, proceed very fast so that the government creates jobs and so on. And through that effort, some problems have occurred. So now let's see the drawing, let's draw the parallels. What are the common things, or what are the common denominators that, that are reflected in all of these water systems. So let's exclude lakes like Matahara, which are very saline and which are not affected by water hyacinths. Then, as we have seen, in all cases, agriculture is expanding, irrigation is expanding, and then when the rainy season stops and the dry seasons come, then the water regresses. Then farmers in all cases follow the water shore and then do their agriculture, where silt very easily flows into the water system, carrying with it the nutrients that are applied into the farm soil. All with high imported agricultural inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, whatever. All with growing human populations and expanding settlements. In all cases, we have seen natural vegetation removal exposed the topsoil in their watersheds, then which made the soil vulnerable for runoff, to be washed by runoff. All waters lost, all water bodies, wetlands, have lost their natural submerged and emergent vegetation because of the turbidity. That wouldn't allow light to go into the water system so that these plants would grow. All are exposed to climate changes. So as a developing country, our mitigation measures are also very poor. In all cases, there are increasing built-in environments altering the hydrology of watersheds, leading to floods and enhanced erosions and eventual eutrophications in the water systems. In all cases, rivers and runoffs are loaded with silt, nutrients, heavy metals, pesticides, and some plastics, as we have observed in our studies. Lakes with brown waters, no light entering into the water system, no aquatic plants grows, including phytoplankton, no nutrient uptake, and eventually eutrophication due to excess nutrients of phosphates, nitrates resulted in the water systems. In all cases, agricultural settlement expanded at the expenses of forests, bushlands, and wetlands and grazing areas. And then obviously when the space has become, the wetland space has become very good area for invasive species like water hyacinth, water lettuce, cyanobacteria, and others that took the opportunity to expand very fast and very quickly. Now, so the cause. Now I come back to the title, which is the cause. Then the cause is nothing less than us, we humans. And of course, from among us, then we should, and I exclude those people that you have seen in the epilogue. Those poor people the natives who require for the minimum water quality for their survivals. Now they are being denied because of the development we are undertaking, and they cannot be blamed for this. But all other people, including the academics, who haven't probably done enough work, then contributed to the offsetting of the resilience of the wetlands. The effect, then the growth of invasive species like water hyacinths, which captures light from above the water surface, suspends its roots in the nutrient-rich turbid waters, and then remains sheltered in the leeward sides of the lakes and flourishes extensively. Is there a way out? Now the final chapter is then what can we do? Is there a way out? Definitely there is a way out. There is yes. But what do we do? The thing is, then we need to require a commitment from public, private, government, intergovernmental actions in the case of cross-border water bodies that are infested by invasive species, or that may migrate, invasive species may migrate from across borders from one country to another. So there is a at the end, then there should be a big change, particularly in our behavior in the use of land use and water use systems. What can be done now? There are many suggestions. These are anybody's recommendation. I just suggest a number of them. These are not prioritized, but as I feel and probably could be done are some of them. Then the major thing is consulting the people. Land and water use, including the buffer zone formation, is very important, I believe. Agricultural inputs should be proportional to soil, crop type, and follow fertilizer application procedures and so on. These are all done by tradition in this country. The government supplies fertilizers to the waradas or districts and then go to the farmers associations, and then even kids, I've noticed, I've seen even children also being asked by their parents to distribute fertilizers in the land. And the kind of relationship that would be expected from agronomists is not being followed. So we need to manage our wastes. We need to capture emissions if we can. Again, this requires also technology. And we need to manage our constructions that are extending to the water shores. And we build our hotels right on the shores. And all the water and liquid wastes enter into our wetlands from the towns on the shores and hotels and so on. Directly we need to manage our human and livestock populations, manage climate change if there are mitigation measures that we can do, set resilient government policies on land use. That has to be probably revisited. Without managing the watershed, without managing the land with the appropriate policies in the watersheds of wetlands, it will be very difficult to control the quality of the water in the wetlands and then eventually control the water hyacinth. Change our feeding habits also probably if we can from animal protein. If we switch to plant proteins, then we do a lot of service to the environment, in which case animal farming is a big producer of nutrients and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. In state efficient food use, we need to control, where in our agricultural production, food losses to insects or rodents and so on must be controlled, obviously, to optimize our harvest. But again, at the table, when we feed, then the rest food that we leave is also contributing a lot to the amount of nutrients that go out of the house into the water systems and then add to the nutrient load in the water systems. By Ethiopian tradition, when you are invited to some dinner or so, it's very unpolite if you completely eat away the food. And then you leave some food, which is bound to be thrown away. Maybe we need also improve our traditions. Change the traditional land use system also to zero grazing or close to zero grazing, improved animal productivity, less animals, more production. Can we do vertical farming? And I see many spaces, even in Addis, which could be converted into vertical farming, many empty buildings, which could be used into farming. Or maybe we do the same in other areas as well. Improve development projects from being focused on just producing economic benefits and jobs, but also consider conservation concepts and actions. Change the architecture of our settlements so that they somehow accommodate some green space in them. The green economy, which was started some years ago in this country in a very beautiful way by the development of climate resilient green economy strategy by the previous government. But in the later years, its reports were very rare. That should be encouraged probably. Plan the population growth, family planning is not so much pronounced in this country. So what else can you suggest? I am sure you people, audiences here, nationally and internationally, I'm sure you have got many ideas that you can contribute. These are just my small reflections. I may add, probably we need to have to make stakeholder analysis from the poorest to the upper, from the top government administrators to the lowest, top down over a long time, and then and see what each stakeholder does in the water system, how much each needs water, or how much space, whatever, and then make people responsible or manage also their actions. So it needs transparency. Although I'm not a historian, being transparent is very difficult in this country. I'm not sure if there's no country. Ethiopia has not so much good history in freedom of speech, but then you may ask me, what has that got to do with water hyacinths? But if we want to manage our water hyacinths, then we have to manage our watersheds, and then we have, which are public property. Then we have to manage our water systems, which are again public property, which are free to everybody. Anybody who has got a pump then can put on the shore and pump any amount of water, whether appropriately used or not. And that requires then change of government policy in land use and water use and so on. So then there comes then the right, to discuss the right, the freedom of speech. That's how, unless we do appropriate watershed management, unless we do the appropriate water management in watersheds, it's very difficult to manage the nutrient load of water systems, given the present condition. If we do this, then we can take care of the effects, which means water hyacinths or reduce floods and siltations, maybe reduce needs of inflows and export of the same from the sediment into the upper column of the water, and sustain the life of Lake Tana and maybe other water systems. So with that, then I come to the epilogue. Finally, I started with a prologue, then the conclusion part, maybe just a reflection, would be wetlands are the lowest points in all watersheds, and that is a major reason why water eventually percolates in these areas, be it on surface or underground. So that is the basic thing that then we need to realize. Then again, because that wetlands are found at the lowest points, everything slides down to fill them, be it above or below ground, the silts, the dissolved substances, and so on. It's very simple law of gravity. So we should always know that beyond water hyacinths, the looming effect of our making is even the drying of lakes can occur, like can happen in Lake Tana or any other water system, like it has happened in Haramaya. The size, the bigness of Lake Tana should not deceive us. Maybe it may take a long time if business as usual continues. So this kind of way of operation should be anyway. At all levels, then complete behavioral changes is required, and then everybody has to be responsible and work together. So we need them to talk. We have to talk, but more so, we need to act, and while there is still time. So with that, I say that there are still, somewhere around Lake Tana and other places, there are still some thriving, very pristine wetlands like these ones, whose shores are very well protected. You can see the water lilies and the calmness of the water, which if trends continue the way they are, eventually we will catch up with these ones also, and then cause all the damages that have happened in other wetlands that we're discussing so far. So we need at least to come back to this level so that makes this water available to the vast majority of the Ethiopian poor. So thank you very much for your time here at home and internationally. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Brook Lemma, for your very nice presentation, which has scanned the situation of water hyacinths in all water bodies in Ethiopia and has successfully drawn the parallels to give us a comprehensive recommendation how to combat the problem. Back to the audience. There are two types of audiences for this seminar. There are audiences in virtual audiences and the audience which are participating here, actually in this room. So you can ask questions. There are two ways to ask questions. Those who are participating virtually can write their questions in the chat box or say it out. Those who are in the room can raise your hands and ask your questions. I will give the first priority to the participants which are participating virtually, and then I will come to those who are participating in the seminar in this room. So now I don't see people raising their hands who are participating virtually, or none of them are writing questions. So can I say there are no questions from people participating virtually? So I will come back to those now participating the seminar face-to-face in this room. Please raise your hands if you have questions or comments.
I raise my hand.
I don't see a hand. Kabede, you can say it out.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Zariun. Professor Brook, thank you for the presenting like this.
Do you hear him?
Nice things regarding very issues about wetland issues, nearly problem all over Ethiopia. There is some echo behind. I don't know from the room. I hope it is solved now. Okay, good. So in that case, I have one thing. Actually, you already mentioned about different problems, like what are the causes, what are the solutions. You could mention many solutions as much as possible, like a kind of many lists are there. Actually, around the it, you could indicate this needs kind of prioritization. So I really urge on these prioritization issues because there should be a kind of a multi-criteria decision-making process in order to have some kind of solution ahead, especially for policymakers. Not only criteria, multi-criteria, rather also multi-stakeholder analysis should be done, in order to have a kind of short list of solutions ahead. That means one recommendation can be a problem for another one. For example, you could mention animal-based protein consumption should be reduced. I really disagree very strongly with this because I'm from Addis Ababa University College of Veterinary Medicine and Agriculture, where we really promote a lot of livestock production, because livestock or animal source foods are the most protein source and then which should be recommended. Make sure that Ethiopia is one of the lowest consumer of even these livestock products, and then we are suffering a lot from lack of nutrition, stunting, and many issues. So this recommending not to really consume animal source food would be a kind of a very, very a little bit rough recommendation, I would say. That is why I'm really strongly suggesting a kind of prioritization issues, which I hope should be done within a short time for implementation purpose, which the center organizing this webinar can really do it. Thank you very much. This is my comment. Over.
A bit of reminder, those of you who would like to ask questions, please make it brief.
Professor Zariun, can I say something? Professor Zarihoud? Are you hearing me?
Yeah, let me read it out.
Professor Zarihoud, are you hearing me?
Thank you for your presentation, Prof. What do you recommend as immediate solution to control water hyacinth as it is expanding very fast? Do you have experience from other countries?
I have like 3 questions. One is just curiosity. You talked about I don't remember the group that led to the drying of the lake. So I wanted to find out when the lake dried, is the crop still being grown or high appetite for water? Where do you think is the tipping point? Is it still very far when we really take these issues seriously? Because it looks like it is still a business as usual. When do you think we'll reach a tipping point where these things will be taken seriously?
Who are participating virtually, I'm sorry that you cannot listen to the questions raised from the room due to technological failures. Prof. Brook, you have greetings from Dr. Amma Balai. He says thank you, Prof. Brook, for an excellent presentation on a very pressing problem.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions forwarded or suggestions. The first one is from our friend from here in Ethiopia, virtually attending the workshop from one of the biggest colleges of Addis Ababa University Veterinary Science, who was not comfortable about switching from animal protein to plant protein. Well, if I would then say about this, what I would say about this is that, completely switching from animal protein to plant protein is very, very far off from where we are now today in time span. We haven't even started in Ethiopia. It's a long way off. But the way of animal farming that we do today has been proven to be one of the major causes of climate change and high amount of nutrients supply into the water system. Again, with the kind of the kind of animal husbandry, the kind of management, or the level of animal husbandry management that we are following it today in this country, the amount of wastage that is released is again very high. So I have suggested that I didn't completely rule out the use of animal protein, but I have recommended that we approach more toward the zero grazing, towards less number of head count of animals to more productive, fewer animals, smaller number of animals. And that would then save us more space for forests and bushlands and so on. And then that would save us also from releasing a lot of wastes. So there are steps in between that have to be taken to save the environment and to save the to save us from releasing a lot of waste from the traditional way of animal farming that we are doing. That's what I was suggesting. About prioritizing the various recommendations, it is true they have to be prioritized. But the thing is, then it depends from which point of view that you look at to decide the priority from which point of view do you look at it? I mean, from the community level down to the bottom, the people level, do you look at it from the government level and so on? So to prioritize and then, put the actions in their proper order for implementation, then you will have to do a very good stakeholder analysis and then discuss the issues and then take home the prioritized list for implementation. So as an individual, reporter on my side, it may be very difficult, but I really accept to work on prioritized kind of plan towards the conservation system and then maintaining the nutrient control level in this country. As immediate solution, some friend also asked about what are the immediate solutions from international experiences. There are also many immediate actions that are being taken in this country, because from the presentation, maybe I haven't mentioned the different activities, but these activities are probably fragmented in different water systems. The national plan is being prepared for the control of invasive species, particularly the water hyacinth. I know different academic institutions being consulted to come up with recommendations and so on. Currently, there are activities that's being done, like removing them by hand manually. I don't know how much that works, but it's still a kind of contribution, which I don't rule out completely. There are people who are trying to convert water hyacinths into immediately usable materials like compost or animal feed or different kinds of usable construction of different household materials out of water hyacinths. These are being tried in different communities. I know very, very recent experience in Bangladesh where shore communities use water hyacinths as it is where it is, and then put some rafts on them, and then on the rafts they place some soil on it and put some vegetable crops on the surface, and having a floating farm on the water hyacinths, because the water hyacinths keeps the water floating and the plants the crops do not need any watering, and they do not need any nutrient because the water at the base is rich with nutrient. There are also communities using this. There are many actions that are being experimented in this country and internationally as well. With regard to the last question, the last person, Peter from here in our conference hall here, he has asked 3 questions. What happened with that if Lake Haramaya has dried out, because it is dependent, the farmers were dependent on this crop. Well, it is very interesting also to note that the farmers and the people or the community at large in the Haramaya area, once they lost the surface, the next thing they did was they went into underground to extract underground. Now in the dried fields, you see over 15 water pumps sucking water out of the ground. And these are being sold to farmers and then for household use also. But of course, the cultivation of chats or cavadulis is not as extensive as before. It's more limited to the rainy seasons now, but still there are farmers doing it by irrigation using groundwater in the area. Again, because of the last rainy season, which was very extensive in this country, as it was in Kenya, Uganda, and in the Far East also, Philippines and so on, the lake has come back. From all over 20 years experience of the area, I am sure the farmers in that area will not rest a day from taking the water now and then extending to continue their vegetable and chat farms. But I will see. I'll be there next week and we'll see what and come back with another report. And then the second question is why is business as usual continuing? Then why isn't the land use management, the water use management is not changing in this country? Because the damages are very, very visible. Then there are these competing interests between, between conservation and economic development, between economic development, creation of jobs, benefits and so on one side and conservation on the other side. Very pressing day by day is providing food to the large population of Ethiopia, over 100 million now, and providing jobs to the majority of Ethiopians who are very young and who need jobs and work, and that is a very big task. I wonder how long governments would persist in this country if jobs and benefits are not provided to these people. So these two competing compartments of social development have to be come into agreement in consultation of stakeholders, and then they should put on the table whatever resource people have now in their hands and how much do they need of it and for how long and so on. All of this has to be discussed, and then those who have discussed then have to be again responsible for its implementation. Definitely that's not an easy task, but I think it is the inevitable task that we must face if we must continue. We must continue if we need to make our wetlands sustainable. Where is the tipping point? I think the tipping point is when you have the stakeholders, to be responsible of their actions. And that would be when that would come. I'm not sure when. I don't know when. Yeah, thank you.
I have comments and questions from participants. Comments from Ubatu.
Yeah, I have comments and questions from audiences participating virtually. Tababu Ubatu says how important the situation, the presentation is, and how worrying the problem is. And in the end, he says, is there a law for wetland conservation? And Sahai Ubatu says, do you compare the ground nutrient load effect on lakes along with surface water load and internal sediment? I don't clearly understand what that means, but maybe you do. Ishatu Esther Kianguli says, I feel like the second part of the webinar title is not so clear. What do we really mean when we say the egg and the chicken syndrome? And how does this apply to different African countries? So you may have to comment on the egg and the chicken syndrome again. And there are other comments, but just for the sake of economy of time, I'm not going to read all. These are the important questions from the audience participating virtually.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate the compliments from Dr. Amma, my professor from here while I was very young. And I also thank the compliments from my childhood friend, Robert, now in the UK, for the questions. Here, Tababu asked about a very basic questions, a very important question. Is there a wetland law or policy in this country? This, so far as I know, this is being developed. But wetlands are tangentially managed through regulations for fisheries, from land use, and so on. Ethiopia is not a signatory of the Ramsar Convention for wetland management. So Ethiopia has got its own policy of wetland management, which is in a way very much subject to the land management, which is land is public property, the same as water is public property, to which everybody has got equal access. These have affected the water systems because anybody can take as much water as a person wishes or with any size capacity of pump. So long as we are not internationally compliant to international conventions, particularly with regard to wetland management, the situations may be difficult. But in any case, this does not prevent Ethiopians from managing their wetlands, from consulting among each other on how they manage their wetlands. But again, I still stress that users have to be consulted and be responsible of their actions. I have not completely understood. I didn't completely get the question of Sahai Ubatu. Yes, I've mentioned extensively about the runoff, the loaded runoff that enters into water systems through rivers and seasonal runoffs during the rainy seasons. Groundwater systems also carry lots of materials into the wetlands. These have been also recorded by hydrologists from Addis Ababa University and other places in this country. And the internal nutrient cycle within the wetlands also a very important factor that supplies injects nutrient up into the upper water column where photosynthesis takes place. So eventually then the balance became so much excessive towards the nutrient flow into the water systems because the water sources are not also buffered or not also protected. Maybe that's what you are asking. The title is The Egg and Chicken. It's because I took this, in its literal sense. I didn't mean to imply anything particular about it. I have, at the beginning of the presentation, I have mentioned that I have attended a number of seminars here in Ethiopia and listened to a number of media reports and conference reports and discussions. And there is, lack of clarity on the real cause and the consequences and how the water hyacinth is affecting the water systems. And eventually I have sensed in my mind that the arguments are cascading down to blaming water hyacinths as the cause of the degradation of wetlands. But I think, we actually created the ground for water hyacinths to come and damage the environment. And then the real cause may not be the water hyacinths. And so is it water hyacinths or us or some other thing? And which is it? Which came first? Is the egg or the chicken? That kind of idea I wanted to probably I have succeeded to a little bit by attracting many of you to come to this presentation and attend it because it's a bit catchy, That's all I wanted. I didn't mean or I didn't imply anything about it. That's all what I wanted to do. But at the end, you know, the bottom line is, you know, water hyacinths could have come anytime, even when the lakes and the wetlands were oligotrophic, when they were very poor with nutrients, because birds migrate from water body to water body. And these plants couldn't succeed to grow in oligotrophic water systems. But only when we now loaded the wetland with high nutrient supplies, then they found the fertile ground to take up this extra nutrient and flood the place, cover the place. So probably we are the causes. You know, that's what I feel. So if I have succeeded to attract you because I added that egg and chicken, then I have succeeded. Thank you.
I have one last question from the audience participating virtually. Dr. Seifu Kabade from South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal. He wants you to be specific. What specific nutrients, X, Y, Z, and what specific local environmental conditions, DO, turbidity, temperature, etc., leads to the infestation of a lake by water hyacinths? Very difficult question.
Really very difficult question, and very specific. Thank you, Dr. Seifu Kabada, who has also been my teacher here at Sabah University. If it's the same Seifu Kabada, who has been teaching me genetics. The specific things, particularly with nutrients, that is obvious, nitrates and phosphates are the most dominant kinds of nutrients that we find practically one of the parallels that we have noticed in the water systems of this ones. The turbidity, as you have seen, Ethiopian waters have, in terms of, if I should measure them in terms of Seki depths, then the turbidity, the Seki depths of Ethiopian waters is, you find 20 centimeters, that's very, very, very good. You find 15 centimeters, 10 centimeters of water turbidity because of the siltation that is taking place. And in some rare cases, like in Coca, because of the high cyanobacterial load microcystis load in the water systems. With other detailed kinds of, you know, measurements like, you know, silica or calcium or any other, you know, chemicals in the water system, then we have to go into the details of each research. These are just summary in connection with land use pattern and water quality and the coming of water. I just wanted to give the bigger picture, not actually the details of each one of them. Dissolved oxygen amount is, you know, decreasing again in addition to the warming of the water systems with climate change. So, thank you.
Yeah, if we had a time series analysis of the nutrients of the lake, it would have been possible to pin down the tipping point when the lake became very rich in nutrients and capable of developing or attracting or encouraging the infestation of the lake by water hyacinths. So in the absence of such data, one would need to know what was the exact tipping point of that encouraged the water hyacinths. And such data is not commonly available. Would you like to
finish?
Yeah, but you can comment on that.
Yeah, that's a very good insight. That's a good point. I think that's not very difficult to do because there are in some water systems like Zuwai, like Tana, and probably Hawassa also. There are series of data collections by graduate students, master's and PhD students, and publications, many series of publications. And a review can be made into this and to see where, you know, the curves for, you know, phosphate nitrate increase and the rise of the water hyacinth plant, you know, intersect. That could be very easily done. Yes, it's a good insight that can be done.
You think it is possible to? Yes, great, good. So that's a research question.
Yeah, it's a research
Very
question.
Now I would like to close receiving questions from the audience participating virtually. I'll give the chance to those participating actually here in the room. If there are questions, please raise your hands. Could you say it loud?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Professor Brook, for your excellent presentation and also for your nice recommendation. But from my experience, actually, the real cause for the water hyacinth distribution, Lake Tana Basin or Lake Tana, is the operation of Tana Basin project. I guess the operation of the Tana Basin project. Because all the causes that you listed in your presentation, yeah, even the dark color, but actually the different layers that actually going to the lake actually can join the upper river, main upper river. There is actually the flow with high velocity. But nowadays, maybe after starting the operation of Lake Tana, Lake Tana or Tana Basin project, the inflowing from the high nutrient source areas, for example, Rup watershed or Guma watershed, those are actually entering to the center of the lake, right? So that means there is a high concentration of nutrient source, the lake, right? Because, yeah, all the inflow into the lake actually is like concentrated or actually is not going to the main upper river, the high, the natural high velocity, because there is a weir, right? So from my experience, I guess, you need to touch the effect of the Tana Basin project on the rapid distribution of the water hyacinth like in the Lake Tana. So I guess that's the main problem for Lake Tana case. So what's your comment on that?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the question. And I think I understand what you meant. Because the hydropower plant is there, the water is made to slow down instead of running out of the Lake Tana into the upper. Of course, that is one of the requirements of water hyacinth to proliferate. That is, water hyacinth requires quiet water. Otherwise, it will float and then move away from place to place. That is one of the cases that we are seeing in Abaya. When the wind blows in one direction, it comes and accumulates here. And the wind, Lake Abaya is very wide and very extensive.
Excuse me, Professor Brook. Excuse me. There is a background echo.
In the case of Tana, then even the water hyacinth could have gone down. Maybe that has created, this mirror, the quiet side of the lake where water hyacinth come. But the bottom line is that so long as the nutrients keep on coming into the water system, even that flow rate of the Nile, of the Tana into the Nile, could have been overpassed and allowed the level of the nutrients into the water system, if that is the case. But in any case, again, the bottom line for me, the one that, at the end, what we need to do is control the nutrients. And after all, letting these nutrients going down into the river would mean then a cross-border problem in Sudan and Egypt, where it will go there and then also flood their spaces and then make their space. Then are we exporting this to other countries? Why we should solve our own problems here? Just to, these are things then that you need to balance out. Maybe, as you say, maybe the water has been slowed by the fact. Then, made it faster for the water hyacinth to take root. But eventually it will have come anyway. So long as the nutrient input is not reduced. Even now, today, You know, I know thousands and thousands of different farmers are laboring to take that out of the water, and they're removing it. A lot of money is expended, a lot of people are laboring there to remove it. But every time they go back home, it replaces itself. I appreciate their efforts. Maybe they have succeeded to some extent, but still, the water ice is still there. So it needs another. But then we need to know how we need to manage our watershed, manage our nutrients, to bring the water from eutrophic system to oligotrophic system, and then by default, the plant grow.
Yeah, great. I think we have exhausted taking questions from both types of audience. I would like to call upon Dr. Fallaka to make a closing remark, and then we shall say the end of the seminar.
Thank you, Professor Zarihoun. Can you hear me?
Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No.
Yes, Dr. Fallaka, yes, it's audible. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, good. So thank you very much. So it's a great success to have more than 60 virtual participants and a room full of face-to-face audience. I would like to request following this.
Dr. Fallaka, please unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted.
It's audible. Dr. Zarihoun, check your speaker. That's why. The speaker is muted, I think, your speaker. We can hear Dr. Fallaka from our side.
So I will continue. In any case, sorry for the inconvenience. I would like to request Professor Brook to summarize the presentation as a policy brief, which we will communicate to key stakeholders, mainly the government. So I think we will work on the document and improve the content. And the next, sometimes in the near future, we'll organize a webinar on more on integrated control measures with some prioritization on the invasive control of invasive aquatic species, because there's a lot of interest, and we have seen a number of comments, interesting comments. So I'm very much impressed with continuous engagement attendance in this webinar, which I think which will motivate us to move on to organize more webinars of key development challenges related to water management in African countries. So we'll invite people from different places, including Professor Amhabalai and others, other African colleagues, which face also the same challenge in Kenya, Uganda, and other countries, Malawi, and so on. So we will announce our next webinar to you very soon. Thank you very much. With this, over to you, Professor Zarihoun.
Thank you, Dr. Fallaka, for your quick remark on the future of such webinars and what you intend to do in the future. I think this webinar, this seminar, has come to an end. To all participants, I would like to thank you very much, and I would like to invite you to come back again on the same series of seminars that will be announced. Thank you very much, and this seminar is now closed. Thank you.